This is the Comics Alternative on Location, the Hernandez Brothers panel at HeroesCon 2017. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative on Location. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And what you're about to hear is the panel that Andy and I moderated at this year's HeroesCon with Gilbert and Jaime Hernandez, and we're proud to be sharing this with you on today's show. But before we get to that recording, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative on Location is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off at the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts could be anywhere from 20 to 35% off of the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price, sometimes 50% off of the cover, but you can also find discounts that go higher than that.
That's right, and since we're talking to the Hernandez brothers, you can go check out DCB Service for a load of Hernandez brothers books, both as part of the Love and Rockets series and separately, that are available at discounts from 35 to 40% off.
That's right, Andy. You can't beat these deals. And you know, it's like two tastes that go great together. The Hernandez Brothers and Discount Comic Book Service. Be sure to go to dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your Hernandez Brothers titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that Andy and Derek, the two guys with PhDs, sent you.
That's right.
Well, Andy, this is something that we've been teasing our listeners about for a few weeks now. As we are recording this introduction, it's almost a month since we did the Hernandez Brothers panel at HeroesCon.
Time flies.
Yes.
But that was a great experience. I love doing this panel, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. That's
right. Now, we should mention a couple things. One, in terms of the timing. The reason why we didn't put this up any earlier is because we had to wait for the good folks at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find to put up these recordings on their YouTube channel, which over the past week they have just started to do. And there's going to be more to come, including the panel that you and I also moderated, Artists. So we may get that one up in a future episode. But this just became available recently, so we wanted to include the audio, because it's a video that people can find on YouTube, but this is the audio version. Another thing that we should mention is that in the last 15 minutes of our panel, that's when we open up questions from the audience. And whereas Andy and I and the Hernandez brothers each had microphones so you can hear us clearly, you may not be able to hear questions from the audience that clear. I think you can make out the most of what people ask, but you can definitely get the context from the responses that each brother gives to those questions.
Right. And so I think it's fairly easy to figure it out once you get once you hear the answers. But yeah, unfortunately the audience wasn't mic'd.
Right. But it was a great conversation. I think it went off without a hitch. So let's go ahead and let our listeners hear what that panel was about.
Yep, let's do it.
I want to welcome everyone to HeroesCon Hernandez Brothers panel. My name is Derek Royal. I'm one half of the Two Guys with PhDs, the Comics Alternative podcast. I'm also a professor of arts, technology, and emerging communication at University of Texas at Dallas.
And I'm Andy Kunka, the other half of the Comics Alternative podcast and professor of English at University of South Carolina, Sumter. And before we get started with the interview, just want to let everybody know, in case you didn't, that immediately following the interview at the Heroes Aren't Hard to Find booth, Gilbert and Jaime will be signing the Heroes Aren't Hard to Find exclusive cover of Love and Rockets #1, the new one. And so this is what it looks like, and Gilbert's on the back. So
Volume 4, my favorite Black Sabbath album.
And so, after we're done here, you can go down and get that signed and pick it up if you haven't picked it up yet.
I don't think that any introduction is needed, really, when it comes right down to it, with the Hernandez brothers here. But for those who are unfortunately uninitiated, we're here with Gilbert to my right and Jaime right beside him. They are the team behind Love and Rockets. The first issue, self-published, came out in 1981. So basically now we're looking at 35 plus years in terms of an anniversary of Love and Rockets. It's a title that's been around for, in one form or another, in the characters that they've created since then. So they definitely have some longevity, and we want to talk about that longevity today.
Okay.
And so one of the places to start with, I think, since start with actually some of the more recent developments with Love and Rockets, since, as I just showed, we had the first issue of Volume 4, and 2 issues of that are out so far. So if you could talk about, first of all, why switching from the New Stories annual book to the magazine size again?
Basically, for my end, because the annual was driving me crazy. Sitting with 50 pages for a year, drawing this thing for an issue for a whole year started to mess with me. I started to rewrite scenes that didn't need rewriting because I thought they were old. Just a lot of things like that. But also, we wanted closure more often. We missed having an issue out, and then shortly after that, another issue. It's kind of like this. The annual had its strengths because it helped me write some of my more favorite pieces because I had space to do it. But then on the other hand, like I was saying, it was kind of messing with me psychologically. And so kind of trying to decide, well, what do we want, our sanity or or the ability to write longer stories?
Yeah, the Love Bunglers was done in the annual. So
Yeah.
that was, So yeah, there's a lot of good things about the annual. I could do long stories. I could do throwaway stories that were long. Normally my throwaway stories are 3 to 4 pages, but this was, I could actually have 20-page throwaway stories, which was fun for a while, like you said, and then it starts to work on you, and then you realize, and then I realized I was only doing a cover of Love Rockets every 2 years, and that psychologically, that kind of like, what? How? What do you mean? It didn't work. I'm not crazy about doing covers, but I like having them out. I like, like when you're a kid, you go, well, when we were kids, you'd see comic books. There's so many comic books coming out, and came out so fast. And luckily, our older brother was collecting them. Let's say the X-Men or something. And I'm talking about Kirby's X-Men. That there would be so many that I would miss issues just because, they came out so quickly. But what was great is since he collected them, we could go back to them. Rediscover. What we missed and whatever. But anyway, so that's just ingrained in us, just having new covers, a new issue coming out periodically, it's just more fun. I mean, we're still Love and Rockets is still a comic book. We're not, New York Times bestseller guys. We're not, trying to impress anybody with, I don't know, trying to knock down the big two because they're doing that just fine on their own. But anyway, that's all. It's just more fun to do. The only thing that's a little rough is, as soon as we finish an issue, dot the last I, we have to start the next one. So that's a little something, but, I'm pretty much caught up right now. So I think it shouldn't be too hard for a while.
It's interesting. One of the things that Andy and I were discussing yesterday is that what's unique about this transition from your annual into the fourth series, the new magazine format, is that you've really done something that you haven't done with other series changes. So from the first magazine, and then several years later into the comic book size second series, you'd cut off the stories for all practical purposes, the storylines, at the end of the first Love and Rockets, and then picked up with new storylines with the second series. And for all practical purposes, same thing between that second series and the annual. But with the annual coming, and then right after that going into the new magazine, you guys continued with the storylines that you were already working with. And so I'm curious if there were any challenges in going from the annual format to the magazine in continuing those same storylines for each of you.
Only for the readers. Because, what we're working on was the next annual. And so we just broke it up. Broke it up into that's for us. It was easy. I know it's difficult for readers, but your homework is to read the previous issues. So anyway, we actually discussed it. I go, should we just start new stories to ease them into them? Well, the point was that we were just going to go back to those stories anyway. So we were just pushing those stories back again. And I just didn't want to do that. And I just wanted to get through these stories. And then I made a few shifts. I took a big hunk of what I was planning on and I'm moving it into a different comic book because it just doesn't fit in Love and Rockets. Love and Rockets now, since we only have 16 pages each, each issue, there's not much you can do. So I had to take out a lot of stuff that was originally planned for the annual. And I'll be done in a second. And then so I'm putting those stories into a new side comic called Psychodrama Illustrated. And it's basically the continuation of the Fritz stories that I'm having difficulty winning people with. The readers have a real hard time with her stories, but I still got to do them because I've got them planned and I think they're good stories, but they belong somewhere else. It creates more work for me, but at least Love and Rockets is free, so I can just move some of the more difficult things out and smooth it out. Already we just finished issue 3. Already with issue 4, I'm starting anew, so that's cool.
Yeah. I don't. Oh, no more.
So if the Fritz stuff's moving into Psychodrama Illustrated, what's staying in Love and Rockets?
I don't know if you guys have been following, but I had to. Fritz has 2 daughters that she had through a surrogate, and one of them she didn't even know about. So that was the little soap opera plot there. But I have to finish that because I introduced the girls to be continuing characters, right? So now what do? So I moved Fritz out and one of the daughters, and then one of the one that we didn't know about or Fritz didn't know about is going to probably dominate new stories because she's going to be a connection to the readers who are there in the new joining Love and Rockets late, and she doesn't know what's going on. So it's about her figuring out who everybody is and what everything's about and how she's connected, as in family. And so that's what it's mostly going to be about. I really want to return. I have the fantasy elements, but I really want to return to basically 2 people talking in a room. Oh. Which is one of Love and Rocket's strengths.
Yeah. Well, so is the newly discovered daughter of Fritz, is she going to be the way you described her, kind of maybe a stand-in for the reader who may not be as familiar with your work in Love and Rockets? So as she's learning, the reader can
yeah, and that way, the character Killer was originally going to be that, but there's not a lot of people who can relate to her. I mean, she's so superhumanly beautiful that it's like, okay, that's she's a different type of character. And I'm moving, she's still in it, but I'm moving her a little in a different way. Whereas this other character can be just about anybody, the Fritz's mysterious daughter. And yeah, she is naive. She has no idea what's going on. And so that's how she's a sort of a stand-in for the new readers.
Okay.
I'm hopefully, because it always gets complicated. Jaime?
Jaime, I was going to ask you then, with your current stuff, you've got 3 ongoing storylines, right? Princess Anima, the punk reunion, and kind of the ongoing saga of Vivian and Tanta and their family. Are these 3 narratives going to be coming together at some point, or are they going to be remaining kind of separate stories that will go on in Love and Rockets?
Probably as standalone. They all stand alone. But like he was saying, when we went to the magazine, I wasn't done with the stories, and I didn't want to cheat myself or the reader that I would just cut them off. Cause, I had a long range plan for the punk reunion. Mm-hmm. It's winding down, but it's still going to take till at least, issue 4 or 5. The Tonta stuff, is just my fun, something happens and then it ends at the, each story has an ending, which I kind of like. It's like a Betty and Veronica story, in the old Archie comics. The Princess Anima, was planned to be my screw the continuity, I want to have fun, thing. As much as the Maggie and Hopi stuff is very important to me, it's very restricted in real life. And real life, the timing of real life. Princess Anima is just me going, I wonder what's going to happen next. Okay, a monster's going to try to cut her head off. She's going to cut someone's head off. She's going to drink their blood. Okay, fine. It's, that I'm having a lot of fun. It's kind of a release when I'm kind of put the Maggie and Hopi stuff aside for a while. Mm-hmm. It's so bogged down in continuity and character and serious plot and stuff. The Anima stuff, more than the Tonta stuff, is just, let's see what happens. Let's go. Let's draw something fun.
That's really interesting because, when you were here a few years ago, I think the Love Bunglers had just come out at that point, that it really did feel to me as a reader that the Return of the Tie Girls was kind of a purging of that kind of fantastic superhero element at least out of the Maggie and Hopi stuff. And I had wondered back then, is that the end of that? Is that the last we're going to see? Did you have in that time between finishing Return of the Tie Girls and starting the new Princess Anima story, was there this realization that you're describing, that the Maggie and Hopi stuff was too restrictive and you needed to go back to more superhero stuff for that reason?
Yeah, sort of, but the Tie Girls really came out of stuff I was hinting at since the very first issue of Love and Rockets, where there's this kind of this subculture that was this superhero world that was happening beneath their world, mm-hmm. and Penny Century wanting to be part of it since the very first issue. And all these little side hints that I was creating all the way up to this Tie Girl story, I just decided, why don't I just make this all come together and mean something, make sense? So that was also kind of a release, like, hell, I'm going to do a superhero story. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to show the big 2 companies that this is how you do a superhero comic, so that was basically that. And but also just tying it together was kind of fun. It was kind of like, okay, I've hinted that Maggie had a tenant in her apartments that was a superhero in hiding. I'll put her in it. Penny, I know, Penny finally gets her superpowers. Oh, have pity on the rest of the world. It was just fun. Just bring it all together and making it into this one story.
You mentioned Penny Century a couple of times. I remember when Andy and I read and then discussed the first installment of Princess Anima, we speculated, or at least we had wondered, if this would be the way in which Penny Century would come back in some way or another, because, obviously the Princess Anima storyline has, this very similar feel to the Tie Girl story. But the last time we've seen Penny Century is through the Tie Girl story, the Return of the Tie Girls. And I'm not asking you to tip your hand or anything, but, are we going to see Penny Century more?
Well, it's a question I've been wrestling with, because the way her life ended up in the Tie Girls was her memory was erased and she didn't even remember her closest friend Maggie, and that was her punishment for all the trouble she caused. And now I'm wondering, okay, was this Penny in real life, or was this Penny in Tie Girls? So which was the real Penny? If I bring her back, will Maggie go, "Oh my God, you're back," and then she doesn't know her, or will life go on as in real life, that she just comes back older? I haven't decided which one I want to do. I haven't decided which is the reality, which was the fake. But even in the new issue that hasn't come out, Hopi said she's hanging out with they're all hanging out together, all the old friends, and Hopi goes, "Hey, the only one missing is Penny Century." I'm kind of hinting something coming, but I tell you the truth, I don't know what that is.
Well, it's funny thing about Love and Rockets, because we think of, like I said, we grew up in the 60s, we read comics the way they were. Marvel more than DC, they tried to stick to a continuity where it was cohesive, even if it's about aliens and this and that, and even if it was a ghost superhero, and it was because of some scientific reason, not some kind of mystical, and so growing up, there's a lot of Love and Rockets stories from the realistic, in the realistic part of Love and Rockets, where we do throw in stuff like aliens or ghosts. People can accept the ghosts because magic realism is accepted in literature, but alien stuff isn't still, So I have a story where Luba's abducted by aliens. I have a story in the New Tales of Palomar where they're really more science fiction-y, surreal stories. Well, none of those stories happened. Are they dreams? Are they alternate universes, imaginary stories, whatever? But because we would read, I would read an Archie comic or something, and there would be about an alien. Well, Archie comic, there was no aliens. There was no aliens in their life, but they would do a story about that, and it was just a gag. It was just a funny thing. So that's sort of in our head that's okay to do, but people are a lot of times come from the structured world of mainstream comics, where there better be a reason for it, and we don't think of it that way all the time. Sometimes we do, but not all the time. So it does throw people off. They go, "Whoa, Luba was adopted by aliens." They go, "No, that never happened." But why is it there? I go, "It's just it's just happened in the comics, but it didn't happen to her." I mean, it's a weird. We do shift into a almost an alternate universe for our characters once in a while. And so I think that's where Jaime is in the middle of right now, which is really happening okay, let's say the Earth revolves around Maggie and Hopi. Now their world is realistic, even though Maggie started out in the mechanics. And Penny Century, veered off into the fantasy world and stuff. And if you'll notice, people like Hopi aren't in it because she's on Earth. And so there's that. So you have a dilemma of like, where is it going? Like,
which was real and which was, which is,
we do have a lot of readers that are just mired in continuity as this is actually all happening.
I don't want to get too mired in continuity. I could do that too, but Jaime, you mentioning just kind of bringing up Penny Century, it almost sounds like that's, you're planting a seed for your future self to come up with a story that you haven't really thought through yet. And I'm wondering, Gilbert, is that something that happens with your work as well? And one of the things I'm wondering about in particular, maybe a separate topic, is Fritz having these two children, and that we've gone along for years with Fritz, assuming she doesn't have children, and in fact her talking about not having children. Was that one of those things that was an idea that you've had all along, that she would eventually reveal these children, or was that something that came later?
That's something that just came later because originally the character was always going to be lost. Never have kids, be super rich, super desired by men and women alike, yet still lost, And so giving her children would anchor her, and I didn't want that for that character. So I just got to this point, and we talked about this at dinner, and we'll probably talk about it more, where so many of the characters, new characters I was creating, started to look alike to me. Every time I created a new woman, she looked just like, she just took, they look too much alike. I just got into this weird pattern of drawing everybody looking alike because I wanted to draw better. You know, I just go, well, I didn't like the way I drew this person's face, so I'm going to draw this other person with better. Da, da, da. And I got stuck with it. So that's why I came up with all the Fritz clones and stuff. And so like the Fritz's daughters are the ultimate Fritz clones. They're actual, flesh and blood. So that was a later idea, but see, that was for the annual where I could handle all this different stuff. And now that it's funneled into the Love and Rockets magazine, I want to remove that just because it doesn't belong there in such a small place. So anyway, no, I didn't really plan it. It just came out that way. So that's why I came up with the idea that a surrogate had the kids, her daughters, that Fritz never, had her own kids. I gave her a little bit of sympathy, whereas she can't have kids. She'll lose a child if she tries, That's all. It was just because I just started to get repetitious with my drawing style. So I started, I know what I'll do.
We constantly do that when we find ourselves kind of going in a direction we didn't want to. We kind of have the ability to write a whole story of why that mistake happened. Love Bunglers was written from a mistake I made, from a mistake I made from way back in the early comic, where in the newer issues, someone mentioned that Maggie had 4 siblings. I went back to issue 7 one day, just reading it, and it said she had 6. So I had to create her brother Calvin. And I had to do it cleverly where it wasn't like, oh, by the way, she had another brother. Here he is. And so I mentioned that Calvin ran away. He was the troubled brother, and he ran away. I mentioned that in an issue. This was before Love Bunglers. But I kept going, okay, Calvin ran away. Why did he run away? He was the troubled brother. He was kind of disowned by the family. And I started to think about it a lot. And then 10 years later, the Love Bunglers just started to fall into place, because on that same issue and way back in issue 7, the same person talking about the 6 kids mentions Maggie moved away for 3 years and then came back. And I always wondered what did she do in 3 years? Well, Love Bunglers just took all that. Actually, Browntown, the story, took all that, and all that just fell into place. And it included the missing brother, why he was kind of ousted from the family, and Maggie's 3 years of growing up, and before her Hopi days. And so that all became because of mistakes, because I said 5 brothers. I had 5 in the family, and I said 6, so I had to fix that.
Yeah, just one little mistake will create an entire graphic novel sometimes.
We know, Jaime, what you just described, and then, Gilbert, you're mentioning continuity or lack thereof. I mean, that gets us to really what we're talking about now, matters of process. So I found it interesting, Jaime, when you were talking about you're still debating on what to do with Penny Century. And then I know, Gilbert, last night at dinner, we were talking about your experiences in not necessarily writing yourself into a corner, but writing yourself into a place that you didn't know what to do with completely, with Tottenitsen in Human Diastrophism. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering about, the process is when both of you create storylines for particular characters, especially those that you're very close to. Is it often that you find yourself doing something with those characters that seems almost out of your control, but once it's done, you regret?
Yeah, the Tottenitsen thing about where she died so soon in the series is the regrets I have is that she was a great character to write and draw. She was great. People just liked her because she was a real dumb person who was you're very sympathetic to. So you never thought of her as dumb or stupid if she was just didn't know anything, but she had all this energy and she was just great and this innocence about her and this and that. I don't know. I think, I moved toward, in Human Diastrophism, I moved toward the darker side of her that it was a runaway train. I couldn't stop it, and the only way to end it was how it ended, with her death or supposed death. As ghosts. I told you about ghosts are accepted, but aliens aren't. I don't know if most of you know the story, but supposedly she killed herself in a political protest that she didn't even understand. Well, the character, it's not proven that it was actually her. It could be somebody else. She never went to the dentist. There's no dental records, so she could be out there hiding out for embarrassing herself, right? But I'm not going to do that because the story was so powerful for me. And I think for the readers who like the story, that it's just, you're sort of just betraying. You're doing a Marvel thing of like, well, Gwen Stacy's dead. No, she's not. Now she's a clone. Now she's Spider-Gwen. That's just the Cell comics, But I think at the time, and then Jaime was doing Death of Speedy at the time, I think we were just up against, keeping ourselves, on top of the heap, or at least, being noticed, because comics were fragmenting, going different ways. And people are giving credit to comics that were really very good. And I'm talking about mainstream comics, and I won't name which ones they are because I don't remember them. It was that long ago. But just that the weather shifts and you start lesser stuff. And I don't mean that our stuff's all that great, but just things that were just like, oh, Captain America is no longer Captain America. He's running for president. And I go, that's crap. Why do you care? But it's getting attention, And so anyway, I think it was just to get just put more power into our stories, once they get, and then once I did it, I'm like, that problem solved. I regret a lot of it, but it worked. So
yeah, I
regret Speedy.
Sometimes I ask myself, why did I kill him? I didn't have to kill him. I forget my reason, original reason. But it happened, and I'm not going to go, like he said, he's not going to be a clone or Spider Speedy.
We don't see his body though.
Yeah. See, that's another thing. Was that even him? Ooh.
But yours was had more closure because after, everybody found out he was dead. Obviously, there's
his ghost
process.
Yeah.
There's a process of, there's the body, the police report, all that stuff. That's a little more, taken care of,
Yeah.
It's interesting, Gilbert, that you mentioned that basically human diastrophism is going on in the original series at the same time as Death of Speedy. And one of the things, with the collections that are out now, which are so great and so useful for readers to catch up on, 35 plus years of Love and Rockets, that is missed is that give and take in the issue between between the two of you. And so are there instances in the life of Love and Rockets where so somebody's reading those two stories together, they can kind of see some influence. Are there times in that history of Love and Rockets that really kind of stand out where you two felt like you had to kind of raise your game or do something different based on what the other one was doing in the same issues?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I can tell you that early on, when Gilbert started to tell more serious stories, and I was just doing stories about Maggie and Hopi going to the liquor store, I got a little worried, like, oh, I got to step up my game and get more serious here. What I don't regret any of this stuff before, because the Maggie and Hopi going to the liquor store was building character, and so I don't regret that at all. I think it works out better for me that it did build, and then I started getting into more serious storytelling. But I do, every time Gilbert would do something big, I would go, it wasn't like, I'll show him. Mm-hmm. It was more like, oh shit, I better step up my game and keep my place in Love and Rockets. It was more that.
Mine was more the opposite. I was so, to me, my stuff started to get so convoluted and just heavy with, all the, so much darkness and violence and creepy stuff that I go, man, I wish my stuff, they were just going to the liquor store. So I would want the break. I would want to relax. And I always liked, Jaime works different from me than I work more in a Marvel style where I'm drawing a bunch of stuff and then I add the words to it because I'm not really sure what they're saying and stuff. And Jaime would just write out his dialogue on sheets, and so his pacing was a lot more easy to read. It was, and me, what I would do is like, oh, I forgot this information. So I'd stick 3 word balloons that were, the head would be this big and the word balloon because I needed the information in there. So I didn't like doing that, especially Poison River. There's a lot of that. And so I just envied that fact that it was Maggie and Hopi just going to the liquor store and 6 panels on the page, that just went from panel to panel, and since then I've been trying to do it that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was kind of a crazy period for you, right? When you were in the final days of the first Love and Rockets magazine. Mm-hmm. And I know with Gilbert, I mean, you were juggling not only Poison River storyline, but also Love and Rockets X. Mm-hmm. And then Jaime, you were dealing with the Maggie story post Wigwam Bam, like, how am I going what am I going to do with her now? I mean, it seemed almost as if there was a frantic pace with your stories in those last number of issues of the first series. And I guess that was a determining factor behind deciding to take a break and then do your own things for a while.
Yeah. Basically the continuity was just overwhelming me. I was just like there's too much going on here. I need room to breathe. I need the characters to breathe. So every time I would do that, I would give the character a break after their story was done. But in this case, I had only so much time to cover all this continuity and make it all work. So there was I couldn't kick Maggie out of an issue because she needed a break. The readers needed a break. I needed a break. Mm-hmm. And then let her get some strength back and come back in. I couldn't do that. So she was just working on autopilot, just going and going and going and going. And I think that worked out for the story, but it was kind of like, shit, I can't do this. Get me out of here, And so when Gilbert said, why don't we just stop at 50 and then just kind of take a break and do separate comics or whatever. And I go, good. Okay. I got till 50 for this thing to just crash into the ground. And I tried my best to make it all work and everything. But yeah, it was like, help, I need a vacation. Even if my vacation was just doing another comic. It was just, the continuity was just overwhelming. And
we're inspired by, especially Marvel comic and stuff, which had that continuum. They kept going. It used to be the single issues of Fantastic Four meets this character, and then it started to build up and this and that. And basically Jack Kirby started filling up his comics with all like the Inhumans and all this stuff because he wanted them to be separate books, but he couldn't get those separate books because he had too much on the plate. So he put them all in the Fantastic Four. And so anyway, it's a part of that, at least for me, was that how it just kept building and going. That's what kind of inspired me to do it. And I always admired comic strips in the newspaper where they would have a story that went on for several years sometimes, which is, you look back at it now and you realize they don't need all that. But it was in the paper and it was in there every day. And so it didn't really work for Love and Rockets since it was only coming out 3 times a year and we were doing that type of storytelling. That's why, by 50, I go, this is just going to keep going. And then we got a lot of, negative feedback for that. Like, oh, when is this going to end? I go, well, it's not. And so, there was a lot of, people displeased, with that. And I'm talking about professionals alike who liked Love and Rockets at the beginning and no longer liked it. But, I'm not worried about those professionals because they're no longer professionals. They're no longer here. Because they threw up their hands. They pooped out of their ideas and now they do commercial art. So we get to win at the end. But anyway, so that's all. It was just, we're doing these, really heavy, continuity in a magazine that just didn't really work for it, after a while.
That's interesting. You talk about that negative reaction of readers, and I'm wondering about kind of your readership today, and especially, Jaime, when Love Bunglers came out, and now the Punk Reunion, those really feel like love letters to longtime fans who've, been following these characters, and especially in the Punk Reunion, throwing in, references to, In Bed with the Lights On and stuff like that, and things that, that really, trigger fans' emotions, in relationship to those other stories. So how much does that, do you see as a kind of dedication or, desire to kind of appeal to those long-term fans factor into some of the choices you make in those stories?
It's only a part of it. Part of it's for me. Part of it is trying to make that one song that was mentioned a long time ago, In Bed with the Lights On, trying to make, this is how it made me feel. This is how my friends felt. So I was basically going to a punk reunion in my head when sending them there, and just trying to remember what was it about it that excited me so, because I forgot so much of it. Why was this so important to me? And I mean, I understand, yes, I was a young person, and I, was going to clubs and listening to loud music and having fun. But I kind of wanted, it was the next step in the characterization of what drove you girls to this, my characters, and what made you think of stuff. My wife was a punk at the same time. I met her back in the day, and we like to talk about our old experiences of going to see bands or not going to see bands. She goes, "Oh, most of the time I was out front because I couldn't afford to go in," and those were the fun as well. I mean, I've always tried to approach the whole punk thing from the fans' point of view, not from a band trying to make it and get popular and get signed. That doesn't interest me at all. It was me going to these shows, and whether I could afford to get in or couldn't, or had more fun outside with my friends, so this story is kind of, I'm trying to capture that part of it where, yeah, this is what we did. This is why we did it. This is what kept bringing us back. And, I'm not trying to overblow it with all the sentimentality and nostalgia, and anything, but I am just trying to capture, this is why we kept going back. This is why we did it. And,
well, in terms of very contemporary, current stuff, I know, Gilbert, it's interesting that if you were to ask someone, I mean, not even like 5 years ago, it's like, okay, Gilbert Hernandez, defining feature would be something like either Palomar, or they would mention, if it's a character, Luba. Now when I think of you, I think of Fritz. And it seems as if Luba primarily defined your narrative world not too long ago, that it's Fritz now who maybe is even outpaced Luba in terms of the amount of story that you've created. Do you feel that way?
Oh yeah, she'll when this all ends, she'll have 3 times more pages that Luba ever had, but people still refer to Luba.
Yeah,
because Luba was a great character for the Palomar stories and in Poison River, and then that was it. I mean, she can continue, but and the thing about aging the characters is a plus and a negative. It's, the plus is that, it's different. You age your character. Well, you age them and they get old. So, the old Luba is different from the young Luba. And, sometimes I miss the young Luba, but I realize I have other characters for that role. But Fritz is really, she's more of a vessel. She's not Luba. She's not any of the other characters. She's only exists on a superficial level, even though, her shenanigans affect people. I don't know who she is, and that's probably why I'm focused on her. I have no idea who that person is. She has a blank look to me. I've been even having characters mentioning she has those crazy blank look in her eyes. I'm starting to use that in the stories. She goes, but we don't know what she's up to because she was a licensed psychologist, which is the same as being a stripper. You're basically manipulating people, for personal gain, and so, anyway, so the character fascinates me in the sense that I don't know who she is. But on the plus side, she can go and be anywhere, and cause since she makes films, if I want to do a fantasy story, but I still want to keep it in continuity, I just make it one of her films.
And she's a springboard for original graphic novels.
Yeah, exactly. She really isn't, she's not the other characters. The other characters are defined. She's not defined. She'll never be defined. And, so that's why I shouldn't make her, the focus of stories so much, except for her own movies and, so that's why I'm moving away from that, and having the people around her be more important because they do have personalities. So anyway, yeah, she's a weird thing. She's hard to, she doesn't have the look that Luba had. Somehow, Luba had a defined look. Fitz has her own look. It's her own look, but she's just not the same as the others. And she really, really alienates a lot of readers, and I think partially because in a deep rooted way that she just upsets people. They don't like her, and they want to like Luba. They want to like the characters. I don't think anybody likes Fritz.
We should probably open up the floor to questions in a second, but I wanted to ask one more question because we haven't gotten to, Gilbert, you're so prolific, we haven't gotten to a few of your more recent things. And I know we were told this is a family show, but I did want to bring up Blubber and Garden of Flesh if we could for a minute, and maybe even Maria M, since that'll be coming out soon. But what, with Blubber in particular, first of all, is that going to be continuing, and what role do you see that playing in kind of in your creative process or the work you're doing?
Blubber was just simply, a one note gag, as in there's no, what happened to S. Clay Wilson? He made these types of comics 50 years ago.
Right.
And yet we've gone backwards. Devo was right. De-evolution is real. We have gone backwards to everybody wants to do Adventure Time or an autobiographical story, or they can only relate to certain things like that because everything else frightens people because they're worried about what somebody's going to say about them on YouTube, not YouTube, it's Facebook. So it's just gotten to that. I think people are just really growing in a different way, and the crazy man person comic is no longer around. There's a few of them, but there's nobody that makes comics that people have heard of, do them. So it was just taking a break from like I don't know. Everybody likes Doctor Who and Adventure Time and stuff, but that's fine. But if they saw an S. Clay Wilson comic, they would go after him and hang him, and call him names on Twitter, So anyway, that's all. It was just like I remember growing up with that, and this was disgusting and shocking, but it was funny. That was the main point. And so I just wanted to make a funny, gross comic, really as stupid and gross as I could, but funny, not sadistic. That's all. And then, but I see myself, what always happens when I go superficial is that I start to want to add more dimension to characters. And you can't do it with what these aliens are doing to each other. So I have it more, I'm going to add more people to it. Blubber will only continue if anybody cares and if I care anymore. It's, cause I've cut off series on purpose. Well, I'm only do 12 issues and I'll cut them off. And then that's when people start reading it, so I'm just going to let it die by itself, if it does. But, it's open enough to where if it becomes a serious comic by issue 10, then it will, I'm going to let it.
I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that Blubber is the most vital and important comic being published today, for the reasons you described. Yeah.
just to exist, just to be there and be funny.
But there's also commentary on comics going on in it too that I think is worthwhile as well.
Yeah, it's self-conscious.
Yeah.
Well, we want to give enough time for the audience to ask questions, embarrassing or otherwise, about Blubber or otherwise, with the Hernandez brothers.
Ask Jaime questions. I hog all the time. I talk too much.
So I'm just curious, the work of yours I'm most familiar with is some of the standalone stuff like Chance and Hell or Sloth and things like that. Mm-hmm. So how is your process, your approach different in doing a piece that's going to have a beginning and end in one volume, a standalone kind of piece, rather than a continuing series of which you may or may not know what the duration is.
Well, when I started coming out with those books, it was I thought I was going to make a living. I thought because everything was about the books, New York Times bestseller, everything was about books. Comics have to be books now. And they're so labor intensive that I backed off on them, you know. I like doing them. I like them. I'm proud of what I've done, but, I like the serialized format better because I think I can put myself more in it and then new ideas can come that surprise me, you know. Yeah, it's very difficult. A lot of times, and I won't say which books, but I've actually just padded them because they had so many pages. Some stories are just right for that amount of time, but some of them really, you know, they're only like maybe 50 or 60 pages, but I need to do 80, you know, and I'll pad it with stuff that's not very interesting to me, but the readers don't know which pages those are.
I got a question that kind of came up for both of your talks. It talks about looking at mistakes and wanting to address them, and you're talking about just having these stories and just a place to put them. Are there things right now that either you're not ready to tell, or it's not the right time to tell, or is there some kind of mistakes out there you're kind of stewing on, thinking we need to talk about that at some point, but not right now?
Yeah. For me, it's kind of like little things like, well, which penny century do I want to bring back, or do I want to bring her back at all? There's little things like that. Some things is like, well, these characters need to age a little more before I can tell this one story. You know, it's kind of what the characters let me do. You know, yeah, I've got stuff down the road, but they're just like little thoughts in the back of my head as I'm doing the current stuff. And that's how I mostly work, is while I'm doing something current in the back of my head, I'm creating Browntown. I'm creating something that's gonna explain it all, or something that's gonna tell a portion of their life. You know, so it's basically that.
Great. I want to talk a little bit about your influences. You mentioned, for example, that in serialization and in the way Jaime uses superheroes, there's a lot of movies, but I often read in your works explicit homages to certain artists. Like I remember Gilbert, there's a scene in Poison River where Ophelia and Lugar are walking in a rainstorm, and there's one panel where the lightning flashes, and it's so clearly drawn to look like a Kurtzman panel. It's sort of suggestive.
Yeah, they're never.
I can imagine that panel in my head. And then when we were talking about Blubber, I was like, I imagined you sitting at the drawing board going, I'm going to forge the forge, you know?
Oh,
So are there certain periods in your careers where you felt like certain creators were having a really big influence on you that you needed to process through your work?
It's more, no, it's just that they're more embedded in our heads because we read them as kids. You know, like the Kurtzman style is perfect for comic storytelling. It's similar to John Stanley's storytelling, where it's a, panel, 3 panels in a row showing the same activity, but it moves. It's never really, and sometimes it might be conscious, but it's been so long now that I don't remember if I was thinking of Kurtzman, even though he's so, he's there in every time, depending on the scene and the page in the story. Sometimes it's Ditko, sometimes it's him, sometimes it's Jules Pfeiffer, sometimes it's we never think about it like I'm going to do a thing like. I mean, if I did in the past, I've forgotten which pages those are.
Yeah, sometimes I'll read my older stuff from 10 years back, and I'll go, "Wow, I guess I was really channeling this style of work or this person." Yeah, but it's never conscious. It's just I've just got that stuff all swimming around in my head, and it just all pours out. Whatever's going to get the message across for what I want to tell in that panel, I'll put whatever I've got, into that to make it work. And sometimes it's 3 artists, that I didn't even notice I did,
sometimes I have to go back and research the very first issues of Lock of Rocket, especially issue 1 and 2. I mean, for whatever reference reasons I need. I realized I'd forgotten how influenced by Mobius we were. You know, I've forgotten. It's been so long, you know, but I look at it, I go, oh, this is clearly because when we got a hold of, Heavy Metal magazine, he was in it. He stuck out not only as a great artist, but he was doing science fiction where he didn't give a shit. He didn't care about, if this is the proper continuity or if, Nova is going to be in there or whatever, it was just, okay, here we are in this world and it's nutty to usually the detective that's in the story and all that stuff. And he just made up, it looked like he was making stuff as he went along. He probably did, but he's so good that he can get away with that. He's just one of those natural artists. But I'd forgotten how much influence he had on our science fiction in the first issues. Yeah.
Yes.
You talked a little about what I call continuity and serialization versus what you might call graphic novel. And I was wondering if over time as your storylines have gotten more complex and more detritus in them, is it hard to sell or attract audience or retain audience with the complexity there, or do you find that people stick around or actually put more involved?
Myself, I don't know. I stopped listening to numbers years ago. I don't even know how much our comic sells now. So I think I've been doing this too long where I put out an issue and say, that's enough for me. It'll be enough for somebody. That's all I can hope for these days. It's just like, okay, now I'm back to pleasing myself again because I have no idea who's out there. Till I come to these shows and I'm like, wow, people like my stuff. Yeah, and it's helped me gone on for 35 years because I set a side of me doing this comic as I'm a little kid still drawing comics going, ooh, I drew that pretty cool. I did that. I still save a part of it, the fun part. That's fun for me to do, because if it wasn't, I would have quit long time ago.
Yeah. What was the question? Oh no.
I'm just wondering if it is hard to retain. Or I partly ask this because when I show your work to people, well, what's this about?
Yeah. When I'm doing Love and Rockets or the Fritz universe stuff, it's easy. I mean, it's not easy because it's so hard to put together, but it's easy in the sense that I know what to do. I know what I want to do. I know what people look like, that kind of thing. It's when have to do a job, like work with Vertigo or something like that. That's difficulty because I'm just so used to doing my own stuff. Even now, since I've done so many projects for other companies, there's still I guess because Love and Rockets never really had any heavy editing. I mean, Gary and Kim were there, and now Rick Reynolds, but they were never intrusive. Not with the stories, anyway.
They tried to be in the beginning.
They tried to be, but they hadn't. That was a losing battle. But working with Vertigo and Dark Horse, you have to listen to your editor. You have to deal with them, and it's different. So that's what's tiring to me. That's what I get disillusioned after a while.
When you work for other publishers, the first thing I react to when I see a page is, wow, somebody else lettered this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm happy about that. Let me tell you.
It's like, I'm used to seeing everything on your page coming from a single hand, and it's not that it's problematic. It's surprising.
Yeah, it's more important to do it yourself, all of it. If I can, but I do it is a break after dealing with, editors and all that stuff over at the other companies that, when I'm done. I don't have to letter it. I don't have to, I don't have to worry about certain textures in the art because the color will take care of it, or if it's in color. I know I'll do it. I have enough fun, but I don't have a complete fun the way I do with Love and Rockets, doing my own thing. We were just born to do it ourselves, and the reality is that we have to take jobs,
Mike?
Things about Love and Rockets, given this long publication run, is that we follow those characters age in real time. At what point in the creation of your work did you realize Okay, we're going to be following these characters in middle age. How do you arrive at that? Is that a conscious decision?
For me, it was. I liked Gasoline Alley. I liked there's an old comic strip where they aged. That's all simple as that. And I liked, this is a bad reference, but it's good. It's like soap operas. There was one time I was watching the special on one of the soap operas was having an anniversary, and they had this old woman on it, and they traced her history. She played the same character since the 50s. Mm-hmm. And she was a teenage girl in the 50s, but she's playing the same character. She became the matriarch in the 1970s or whatever. And I thought, that would be cool to have that in comics. That would be cool to have a character that ages that way. And then in Gasoline Alley, of course, it's problematic with the Gasoline Alley because Wallet is 1,000 years old now. Skeezix is 500 years old. But there's that problem. But I just liked it. I just thought that would be cool. I always just like the longevity of characters, a whole life. So that was for me.
Yeah, and I liked it, and I found out that it strengthened the characters because they had a past. They also have a past, a present, and also you can kind of see a future coming. And I think it goes back to as being children, hearing stories from our relatives and grandmother and aunts and people just telling us stories about when they were kids, and you're like, God, you were a kid, and just like that. It's just, there's certain warmth to it that just makes it more human. And my main function in doing these comics is to make you believe these lines on paper are more human than anything. And, so I think that helps a lot. Aging them is like, remember when Maggie and Hopi were 17? Oh my God, we're such babies then. It's just a warm feeling. I mean, unless you had a terrible childhood, of course. but I rely on that a lot because it just helps them be more human.
I remember around, I think a little bit after Love Bunglers came out, you tweeted out something like, oh my God, Maggie and Hopi are 50 years old now. Or I just realized Maggie and Hopi are going to be 50 or something like that.
Yeah. My Maggie is as old as my sister. And when she had her 50th birthday, I went, oh my God. Maggie's 50.
Yeah. We probably have time for one more question before the brothers have to part. Yes, Randy.
Them to go back and read all of that stuff, or is it you're just like?
I used to worry about that, but I can't because there's so much work, and if someone wants to try it, then there it is. Do your homework. And hopefully you'll want to continue through it. But I used to worry. I used to create younger characters because Maggie and Hopi are getting too old. No one's going to want to read old ladies, so I'm going to put teenagers, but they always wanted Maggie and Hopi, no matter what, and
at the same age.
Yeah, and so I stopped worrying about that. I like doing younger characters, but I know that I put as much work into them as the Maggie and Hopi characters, but they're always going to go back to Batman. They're always going to, you can create a new person, but Batman is the guy. It's like the original crew are the ones that people are mostly interested in, and so I stopped fighting that, and I go, well, I'm going to do what I do, and hopefully it'll work. So I stopped thinking about trying to please different generations. I'm just hoping that the minute they read it, they go, oh, I like this. I want to continue.
And the paperbacks are great because it does give us an advantage. If you don't know the backstory, you can read it yourself. Whereas in the old days, if you read those old comic strips and they went on and on, they weren't collected in the old days, so you didn't know who these certain characters were. But for some reason people still read them. You know, they didn't care about what happened before, I guess. I don't know. But with the Love and Rockets collections, they're perfect. Which book where should I start? From the beginning. Well, there's so many. No, there's only 3 Palomar books. It looks like there's too much, but there's not. No, there's only 3 Palomar books, you know, collected. So, it's not that hard. So did I just say read Heartbreak Soup and then Poison River and what's the other ones? I don't know. But anyway, Beyond Palomar, and then those are the early stuff, and then the newer stuff is Ophelia and Lubit's Family and that kind of thing. So it's not that much. It's just people are lazy, don't want to read long, thick books.
A lot of people, saying, I want to start reading Love and Rockets. Where should I start? And I'm like, well, just start. Just start. Just even if you start in the middle, you can always go back to the beginning. And a lot of people would say, well, I don't read your comic because I don't know these characters. And I go, you go to a movie and you don't know those characters. You pick up something, you don't know those characters, so I don't think that's a legitimate excuse.
Yeah, as long as we can do it.
That seems like a really good jumping on point.
Yeah. Well, I'm making it a little easier because I have what happened last. I have a character gallery in the inside front cover just because it's too many characters and too many pasts. So I'll just say who they are and draw their little heads, and you can, if you get confused in the story, you can look and see who they are.
Go buy the collection.
Yeah,
I can see as someone not familiar.
He's not trading card stuff.
Oh yeah. But I'm doing that now just because I know how difficult it is, and I'm making it easier with the new magazine, which I never did before. I have captions now that say flashback, people's
or
house.
Characters say that they're in a flashback.
Well, that was a gag just because I was, I realized because I did the thicker borders, but I didn't give any reference to them. And my wife mentioned, she goes, "How come you do those thick borders?" I go, "Well, they're flashbacks." She goes, "Well, I didn't know that." I went, "Oh," so I made that little gag, and now I put a little note every time I have those thicker lines. I go, "Thicker lines denote flashbacks," because I don't like to intrude with too many captions. This is a flashback. This is meanwhile in Gotham City. It's okay to do, but sometimes it just spoils the flow. And I guess I'll eventually just do it later. I used to do that all the time, and then I dropped it because I wanted the flow. And in doing so, it just lost a lot of readers' attention spans because they trying to figure out what's going on. You shouldn't have to try to figure out what's going on. It should be a simple read. So I'm working on that.
I believe that if a comic is a lot of work to read, then I don't think it's very good.
So I'm working on that.
I was assuming that if there's people that need to get in here for the next panel, that Andy or somebody would come bursting in and tell us to cut us off, but they haven't. But I think probably we're a little past 1:00 anyway, which is when the time is supposed to end. So thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Gilbert and Jaime.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that was a great experience. I feel like that's one of the highlights I've had of doing this podcast so far, is getting that opportunity to talk to the Hernandez brothers at HeroesCon and to have such a great conversation with them.
That's right. Now, we've had Gilbert Hernandez on the podcast before, but this was the first time we actually got Jaime on the show. So it was great to be on that panel with both of the brothers. And we did ask them a variety of questions, not only about their most recent work, especially with Love and Rockets, but also some of their earlier comics.
Yeah.
That was great. Had a great time meeting and going out to dinner with Gilbert and his family, and then having Gilbert and Jaime on that panel. And we should thank especially the people at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find for providing the audio and video for that panel.
Definitely. I'm really glad that they were able to do that for us.
That's right. So after you listen to this panel, and you want to see what things were like, go to YouTube and do a search for HeroesCon 2017 Hernandez Brothers, and then you will see the video of this recording you just listened to.
That's right.
And as Andy mentioned at the top of the show, the place to go for great discounts on Hernandez Brothers books is the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. Be sure to go to dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs, and there's not a better place to find books by the Hernandez brothers, Love and Rockets and otherwise. And after you do get your Hernandez Brothers books there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our panel at HeroesCon this year. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right, or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com. You can also get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And you can also check out our Twitter feed, which is at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. But you can also find us elsewhere on social media, such as on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. And we'll be back with more discussions with more creators in the days to come. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.